This podcast was brought to you by Meros Cryptocurrency. Meros is a cryptocurrency payment system that does what cryptocurrency originally intended to do. Be a practical and secure form of direct payment, Meros utilizes the best of current technology in a powerful new way. It introduces a groundbreaking consensus mechanism called merit caching. This enables Meros to be both feeless and instant while maintaining the same level of integrity of traditional networks like Bitcoin. To find out how you can participate in the future of crypto payments, go to meroscrypto.io now.
Hello and welcome to the February edition of State of the Project, Meros. Now, this project that was formerly branded as Ember, but had to rechange the branding, and we'll speak to Kayaba, the lead dev of Meros, and find out about why. Now, this podcast is a monthly podcast, and every month we go into Meros and we look at what's been happening, what kind of progress has been made, and we ask Kayaba and other members of the team what they've got planned. So I'm not going to take up too much time talking because we've got loads and loads to get through. So it's my pleasure to introduce my guest for this podcast, and his name is Kayaba. Kayaba, how are you?
Great. Happy to be back again, as always.
Yes, Kayaba, it's great to have you back. I'm extremely excited about this podcast, and we've got so much to get through. So could you very, very briefly just let everybody know what your role is within Meros?
Sure. So I'm the lead developer of Meros. I'm in charge of getting the code base done, overviewing the project, making sure we have the talent we need, so on and so on.
Okay, yeah. Right, first question. Meros was rebranded from Ember. Could you tell us why? And could you also tell us how the community has reacted to the rebrand?
So there was this dead coin named Ember and a community revival attempt where so all the community is under the new name, and they're trying to revive it, but the coin itself is really just dead, and it's stalling every few days. There's just a ton of issues, and we just didn't think of it as an issue, because even if the coin itself gets fixed and turns from a dead coin into an alive coin, they're under the new name. That said, a few people were joining our Discord and finding references to the old coin or the dead coin and getting confused. And when it comes to our search ranking, there's multiple projects outside of the cryptocurrency sphere named Ember, like a very popular JS framework. And between the dead coin and the projects outside of cryptocurrency, we just felt the battle would be too hard. Because while we would win it over time, we're still a fledgling coin, and we didn't want to fight that battle now. So we rebranded to Meros. It was a community suggestion. We got community input over, I think, a week. We held a poll, on community opinion over the names. And most of the community liked Meros, so we went with it. I think it was about 70%. So most of the community has reacted well, and they like it. And it's a Greek/Proto-Indo-European word, which means a share of something. And it's related to merit, which is something we already had inside the cryptocurrency. And we liked it. So, of course, 30% didn't like it in the poll. So, yeah, there have been a few people who aren't a fan of it, but it's gone mostly well.
Well, yeah, perhaps they just preferred another name that was on offer. Not to say that they didn't like it. I think Meros is a great name. Or Meros. How's it pronounced? Meros or Meros?
Meros.
Meros. Yeah, I think it's a great name, and it ties in well with merits and sharing something, which is what this project seems to be all about. So it's great. I'm really pleased that you've managed to rebrand smoothly. For me, I also found when talking about Ember, as it was formerly known, that a lot of people would say, is it that Ember coin, the failed project? So I think it is a very shrewd move to rebrand nice and early before you put a lot of money in on branding and all these other types of things along the way. Moving on, let's talk about testnets. Now, You left a cryptic message on Twitter about finding more than you'd planned on the testnet. What exactly did you find, and was it good or bad?
So I don't think I'm ever trying to be cryptic per se. I think I was just trying to fit within that tweet character limit. Basically, we held a testnet over our verifications redo. I remember talking about this last month.
Yeah.
And basically, we had our voting system to approve transactions done one way, and it was really slowing the entire process down. And we figured out a more efficient way to do things. So we got that more efficient way doing. We wrote a ton of code to support it, but then we had to test it. So we created a new testnet and started out very organized, and then we ran into a few bumps here and there. And after it was done, we wrote a summary on our Medium, one of my favorite articles on our Medium in a while. So basically, we found 4 problems within the testnet itself. And 2 of them, so we already knew of all but one of them.
Okay.
In that one of them was really identified because of the verifications redo. Our voting system or verification system uses a specific library, and that library is identifying as unstable.
Okay.
So that was something that as we expanded verifications, we noticed. Besides that, we already knew all these issues from the first testnet, but we really got another look at why they're problematic and what order we should face things in, which really helps us as we move on to our next testnet, which all of these issues we found are planned to be fixed by.
What did you do with the library that was proven to be unstable? Did you have to create another library or swap it for a different library? How did you fix that?
So it's a cryptographic library, and one of the things around the cryptography community is never roll your own crypto. Someone else has already done it in a secure way, and you just should not touch that stuff. So no, we are not going to try to do it.
Yeah.
But we do have an alternative we're working on switching over to. We have yet to do it because it takes time, but we are working on that.
Okay. Makes sense.
I was just going to say that if you want, I can talk about the issues in depth, but I know that we have a lot of community questions and limited time. So really, I would just recommend that listeners go to the Meros Medium and click the article. It's Meros Developer Testnet 1D Summary. It really goes into depth about the issues, what's up, how we're fixing it, so on and so on.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Thank you for being prudent with our time. Right, next question is something I noticed on GitHub. Could you tell me what is the events and network redo that's been carried out on GitHub?
So I actually only opened this last night. One of the things we identified during our testnet was some networking issues, whether or not it was certain network messages being more problematic than they should, as in we just weren't handling some edge cases, or connections randomly dying over a few days to the point where you can no longer connect to nodes. Basically, things that would really harm our long-term stability. And the networking code, I think it's roughly 10 to 15% of our entire code base, which I find surprising for a cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
But it is the messiest code in all of our code base. So basically, we're not going to cause another verifications redo, which is going to be a month long, and then we're having testnet. No, we're not going to do that again. Instead, we may cause a hard fork. I'm not entirely sure about that. But basically, we're keeping the existing network protocol, and we're just rebuilding the library around it. We're deleted the files, but we'll probably copy back in 30 to 50% of it. The point isn't completely redo. It's one of the libraries we use. The code. It basically allows you to find on X, do Y, and then from another place in your code base, you can say, hey, X happened. Like, hey, we received a block, handle it. We're just cleaning that up as well. We've already actually done that part. So it should be done within a few days, and at the latest by the end of this week.
Will this cleanup result in some efficiencies that end users will find, or is it more just for developers and people that are working with Meros directly?
When we do it, will likely increase stability. And that stability increase, yeah, everyone's going to see that. But it's really more for providing a clean code base for developers to handle and expand.
Okay, yeah, I think that's very important. I often run into problems with messy code bases when you move it from one developer to another. Plus, I guess working with NIM being quite a rare language, I guess it might be quite difficult for people to join on that basis.
It is an easier language, in my opinion. It has a lot of similarities with some other languages, though. So I'm hoping that we will find developers who are willing to pick it up.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. There was another GitHub commit which I found quite interesting. It was where you were discussing protections against 51% attacks. It was could you explain what protections were discussed? And is Meros vulnerable to the same attacks that ETC was, despite using merit caching? Is it vulnerable to the same 51% attacks that Ethereum Classic had recently?
So Ethereum Classic had the chain rewinded, and that's not an issue per se. Chains are meant to be rewinded, their nature. The issue is that payments were replaced. So people lost money and a quote unquote double spend occurred. So Meros, because of merit caching, has some protections against that. If you rewind the blockchain in Meros, you can resubmit the old data. And because of how merit caching is lined up, there is some protection there where you can resubmit old data and only have very specific things altered. And of course, even on Ethereum Classic, you could resubmit data, but we're trying to really streamline that and make sure it's secure. That said, with Meros, even though you have instant transactions, you have to rewind 7 blocks, I believe, to actually replace a transaction. You have to at least do 7 blocks. And the commit you're talking about was to our merit caching white paper, and it says if you checkpoint every 6 blocks, you just can't double spend. Even if you rewind the chain, you can't go far back enough where you could actually replace a transaction. So at this point, I think we will implement checkpointing because there are some issues with the initial sync, where if you mess up the initial sync, it can screw you over later because now you have a checkpoint on a secondary chain you're listening to and you can't get back to the first chain. So we'll work on that. I know Dash has some interesting technology on that route, which we'll definitely be studying. But if we implement 6-block checkpointing, which would not be done by a central authority, it would be done via the merit holders, which are miners, previous miners. It would give us proof of stake security because, as much as I hate to admit it, I don't think I've seen a single 51% attack against a proof of stake chain in the last year. So,
well, not a large one.
Yeah, not a decent one. I'm sure some random coin with the community of 300 people has been attacked, but so it will keep the proof of work distribution, but it will give us the proof of stake resistance against 51% attacks. Okay.
There was a technology. I won't ask you about it now. I'll probably save it for next month's question. But it was something that Komodo was doing called delayed proof of work. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but you probably aren't actually because it's quite an obscure project. But
no, I know about it.
Oh, are you? Okay. Yeah. So, do you think Meros could use something like that to secure the chain alongside the merit caching, but just as a hedge against 51% attacks?
Any coin could really, and it definitely benefits smaller coins by enabling some of the security of larger chains. And I'm not trying to trash the security. I don't think Meros is going to remain a small coin, and I'm hesitant to tie us to another chain permanently, because we would have to do a major hard fork to get rid of that. And if we introduce 6-block checkpointing, there's just no point because we've already defeated 51% attacks.
Yeah. Okay. That was kind of the answer I was looking for. So, yeah, that's good. That's perfect. In fact, I'm quite surprised that you know about, well, I shouldn't be because you know everything. Right. Moving on. The next question is about BitTorrent client. And will you create a BitTorrent client that essentially uses the rarely spoken about Kayaba torrent, which is to be built on Meros? So yeah, what are the plans? Will you build a BitTorrent client, and if so, why, or why not?
This podcast has been brought to you by Rhubarb Media. Rhubarb Media are the branding specialists behind successful crypto projects such as PivX, Vendible, and Libertaria. The Rhubarb style is both loved and respected the world over. So if you want your project to appeal to techies and everyday users alike, give Rhubarb Media a try. You cannot possibly be disappointed. Link is in the description.
So I'm not going to yell that torrent is only used by pirating, blah, blah, blah. Now, there's plenty of legit uses for torrenting, whether it be academic papers. I think Blizzard actually uses it for game downloads, and they've actually achieved amazing speeds via that. So no, I'm not going to say torrenting is only via pirates or whatever.
But
that said, I personally have no interest getting into the field. You can. I don't ever recommend storing files directly on Meros. If you want to store a hash, or you want to store like very small sensitive data, yeah, you could probably do that, but I'm not going to recommend storing an MP3. You could probably store a magnet file, which is how you kind of identify. It's, I guess, the equivalent of a website link. You know, when you click the link to get to the site, a magnet file says, here's who has the actual file, here's the ID, so on and so on. You could probably store those on Meros. The issue is that now it's going to be permanently on Meros. Are you doing something illegal? There's now a permanent record that you were hosting this file at this IP. Of course, you have to prove that your IP was actually hosting it, and it's not just. But there are complications in doing it. It could help out with the legal torrenting scene, but then I just don't have a personal interest in it.
So I guess that kind of leads me on to my next question is, will there be real use cases, for example, where companies can store their data on the block lattice, chain lattice, or on Meros?
I understand that this one and the last one was an idiot question, but still, I'm sorry.
They are very similar, but I guess, yeah, you touched on it when you mentioned Blizzard. So I guess there is a room there for actual real world use.
Yeah, but of course I doubt Blizzard would ever use something like this. I was thinking more scientific communities. But something I want to reiterate is while Meros is supporting small data, and while we're going to have our own version of Bitcoin Strip, so you can build a second layer, the real use case of Meros is the currency. That's the use case. Our Bitcoin Script equivalent and storing data on the chain, that's data is a feature on its own, but those are primed at expanding features via another network, like a second layer. So Meros' use case is the cryptocurrency, and that's something I'm going to make sure I don't sacrifice for a smart contract second layer or something.
Yes.
That said, yes, you could store hashes. Scientific communities could store magnet files on there. You can add messages. You could store sensor data. You could log IPs if you encrypted them. Yeah, there's plenty of things you could do.
IPFS addresses, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah. And then if you do build a smart contract second layer, which ends up on Meros, yeah, you could even store your kittens on it.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. It's good to know that you're focusing primarily on the currency and other things a distant second. That's good. Right, so our next question is all about exchanges, and well, the next few are. The first one, well, we've had for the last couple of months running, actually, is are you talking to any exchanges about being listed, and will you sell over the counter?
So I have been talking with exchanges. Say I have friends at some exchanges at this point, and there's a few, but really, Meros isn't at the point where any exchanges could start developing. Because while we have been working on the cryptocurrency, we haven't been exposing enough of the RPC where exchanges could really get their hands on with what they need to do. That's something we're going to be looking at for the first public testnet. So, yes, I'm talking with exchanges. I think I'm at 3 or 4 now, where it's actually extended conversations and some minor planning. But nothing is currently happening. We don't have any contracts written out or anything. And the reason I haven't named any, it's not like I'm trying to make them up out of air and say, oh yeah, we may or may not be talking. No, the reason I haven't named any is because there isn't any firm. I don't want to say, yeah, we're talking with XYZ, and people are like, partnership with XYZ. And then if that falls apart, get mad at me. Or I don't want that exchange to be offended that I use them as a PR point. It's kind of a breach of trust. And then lose Meros on that exchange because of that. I'm just trying to be careful and watch how it goes.
Yeah, that's quite smart. It's generally how most cryptos play it anyway. It's never wise to talk openly, especially if you've got NDAs or things like that unsaid. So moving on, this next one is one of my favorites. It came from one of the developers at another currency called Four, a developer called Julian. And the question is, what's the point of caching work, and what value does it add? And why does it make the network more efficient?
So this is actually about merit caching.
Yeah.
Where merit can be defined as cached work. So basically with merit caching, our consensus mechanism, you mine a blockchain and you earn merit for this. Then you use that merit to create verifications, and then your verifications actually earn you Meros. And those are archived on the blockchain. So the point of caching work is proof of work can never be instant. Or, of course, since nothing is instant, non-latent. Where here I'm saying non-latent because network latency. But basically, non-latent in this sense means when you get a transaction, you immediately handle it and move on. You don't have to wait for mining to complete. So you can wait for a signature, but a signature is a finite action with a guaranteed endpoint. Mining could take 1 minute, could take 10 minutes. So mining, I'm not counting. If you have to wait for other transactions, if you're batching it, that's non-latent. So if you have to mine your transaction, it takes time because mining is only secure when it takes time to mine. So by mining the chain to earn merit, we have a proof of stake version of work. And all you have to do is create a signature, but that signature has the same security of proof of work. So it allows proof of work and instant transactions at the same time.
Okay, that makes sense. There are other projects that have got proof of work and instant transactions. One that springs to mind is Dash, using the masternode system.
So they're not instant because of proof of work. They're instant because of their masternode system, though. So that doesn't have proof of work security.
The actual transactions themselves, yeah.
Yeah, the transactions, while they get archived in the proof of work blockchain, they're confirmed instantly solely by the masternode system. And you could argue that masternodes have greater security than proof of work, but I think proof of work has greater security. So, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. There you go. So, right. So the next question, which is also by Julian from Four, was who processes transactions? Is it everybody, or is it a certain percentage of nodes? And also, how many transactions per second are you shooting for? I know we've covered this one on a previous episode, but yeah, those are the two questions.
So who processes transactions? Every full node keeps a copy of the blockchain, and the blockchain archives every confirmed transaction. So in the end, everybody processes transactions, even if only the miners who become merit holders actually verify transactions. Just like Bitcoin, only the miners actually verify them. When it comes to TPS, we're shooting for 1,000, though part of me hates the theoretical TPS mark, because unless you're actually getting 1,000 transactions on your network, it doesn't matter if you can theoretically handle that, other than just for brief loads of spam. But of course, for spam, we have the spam filter. So we are aiming to launch with 1,000, but that metric won't matter for a few years because I doubt we'll actually reach 1,000 TPS until at least a couple of years in, if ever.
Well, yeah, it's like the old saying, it's always good on paper and it always works until it doesn't. So
yeah, no, you should always design a good on paper system. Like, there's a reason I am shooting for 1,000, at least at the start, but I would be fine with anywhere from 200 to 500. even though it wouldn't make me the happiest.
Okay. The final question, I didn't actually write down who it was from, but the question is, how are you going to mitigate the proof of stake bug disclosed by the team from the University of Illinois? Does that possibly even affect Meros at all?
So this was, I think it's also from Julian from 4. Yeah, it is.
Yes, it is. Yep, that's right.
So we've talked about proof of stake a bit here. And the University of Illinois was discussing creating, among other things, I think the main attack was stake amplification. Basically, you claim to have stake because of XYZ, but in reality, you only have it because of Z, where X and Y are like old transactions that no longer are valid. And they're about filling up the node's RAM with your fake blocks until the point they crash, just because they can't handle it. Since Meros isn't using, first of all, it's not a Bitcoin fork, so we don't have the same Bitcoin checks. And what we do use proof of stake for is not weighted block generation, it's just voting. You have a stake, we keep track of it. Well, there's only one possible stake. It's not like you can say, I have stake because of XYZ. It's just your stake is X. So we have a very different system, and no, the bugs disclosed by the University of Illinois do not apply to us. That said, it is a good reminder of the risks. We may not have the bugs from the University of Illinois, but if we're not careful, we could get our own new bugs. So it is a reminder to always keep track of how we're handling stuff and what checks we enforce.
What plans do you have, or have you made any yet, for bug reporting and for other projects to put forward these type of vulnerabilities if they do find them? Because one of the things I noticed about the University of Illinois' report was that it said a lot of the projects that they tried to contact didn't actually respond to them. So what sorts of things do you plan to put in place for Meros to make sure that you do find out about these vulnerabilities as soon as possible?
So we do plan on creating a bug bounty program, and then of course I'm always active on the Twitter and Discord. But we do plan on creating a bug bounty program, and we'll make sure that's publicized in the proper places, because I remember OneCoin had a bug bounty program, but they didn't even realize it existed. So I am going to try to create one of those. And then beyond that, we also plan, this is kind of outside the question of how can we plan, we make sure we're available, but we also do plan on getting audits of the code base done to make sure that there's less bugs to find in the first place. Because while I'm not saying audits are magic and solve everything, they can definitely help.
Yeah, that's a good point. And yeah, okay, that's excellent. Well, Kayaba, we've managed to get through that entire lot within our allotted time frame. So I'm over the moon about that. Thank you very much for joining me on this podcast and putting up with my ill voice. And it's been great to hear that you've been keeping up with the work. Oh, one last question actually before you go, which I like to always ask you, is do you still feel that Meros, now named, I almost called it Ember then, but do you feel that Meros is still on schedule to be launched at the time which you first planned?
So we're still looking at Q2, and the target was the first month or the first half of the second month, depending on how we get developers on board. Because the plan isn't just to go around begging or plan on just offering the airdrop. No, we are looking into methods of getting funding without transferring over the coins, of course, which is always going to be tricky, but we're working on that. And as I work on that, due to US regulations, which at one point I was looking forward to help protect the pre-mine, they are slowing down the funding process. So it does make me worry about when we can developers, and Meros cannot make that deadline as a one-man show. That said, I do have plenty of friends who have been helping out, and we do have some interested who are willing just simply to work for part of the pre-mine. So it depends on when we get developers. That's all I can really say at this point. We may end up getting pushed back to the second half of the second month, but I think I'm going to need another month before I can give a definitive answer. But I'll always try to be honest about my answer.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today, and thank you for so much for keeping us up to date and everything, and your transparency. It's refreshing to see a project handled in this way. So unless there's anything else you'd like to add?
No, just thanks for having me. It's always been great.
Well, thanks very much, Kayaba, and for anybody listening, all of the links to the GitHub commits that we discussed will be in the description. So please like and subscribe, and please share this podcast with anybody else who you think may be interested in crypto, so that they can learn more and more about this awesome project. And Kayaba, I will speak to you again at the start of March. These months are really racing by. But Kayaba, thank you so much for your time, and I'm really looking forward to the next episode of State of the Project. Thank you.
This show is brought to you by PivX, private instant verified transactions. With its groundbreaking zero-coin staking and masternodes, PivX is the top privacy currency. Feel free to trade some on Binance or Bittrex. And for more information, go to www.pivx.org.